Hi.
Hi.
And hi, everyone. Welcome to Conversations. And I'm really, really excited today to be joined and that Sydney agreed to join and share her experience on, as I would call you, Sydney, you can correct me later on, a creatrix of a container for transformation.
That works
Transformation
beautifully.
transformation for women, and particularly the direction is with the holistic pelvic care. So I know that your passion and your profession, what you are doing is pelvic care, steaming, yoni eggs, therapeutic massage, basically work with women in this beautiful region of ours. I don't know if we can call it even region, this beautiful place within our bodies, the uterus, womb, and pelvis.
Yeah, it's a beautiful introduction. The language that I'm using of late to describe what the work that I do is I'm a women's pelvic health mentor and body worker. So not only do I work with physical touch with women who are local to me, but I also work online with women as a form of pelvic healing coach. Sometimes that looks like sexuality healing. Often it's trauma healing, but how do we start to embody more of this part of the body, our pelvic bowl, to deeper root into the essence of our being and our purpose in the world? And so it can look so many different ways in our culture, even worldwide patriarchal culture. This part of the body is ignored because it's either sexualized or it's considered dirty or dangerous. And so I help women find safety in presence in their body, in their full embodiment, which includes our pelvis.
Mm, mm. That's so beautiful. And looking through your feed on Instagram and through your website, there are really so much valuable information that I think it's like called in for, especially nowadays, when external is so chaotic and so dysregulation happening in our nervous system. It was before, but now even more, plus social media, as we talked as well before the recording, the balance with social media. So there is so many pins that actually kind of tries to sucker in as if into that dysregulation. And so the information that you and your reels, as I mentioned, that you share on your Instagram are so educational and so helpful to really bring this awareness to the pelvis, where I bet, and we will talk about it, that the majority of us women really have some kind of issues or challenges.
Yeah, I think that's really true. Pelvic medicine for me is trauma medicine, it's nervous system medicine. It's about finding safety in the body. And we can only do that when our nervous system is oriented to safety. And we live in a modern world, no matter where in the world you are. We're in two separate places, very separate places right now. But our modern culture is constantly bringing us out of that orientation to safety, out of the body. And so, how can we use pelvic medicine as a way to really root in and to not stop ourselves from being in a dysregulated state or being in the chaos of the world, but to be able to more easily find our way home, back into that safety, back into that stillness, so that we can make choices and choose how to navigate our life in a way that really fulfills us.
So true. And I just draw out one quote. I don't remember whether your website or Instagram, so I just would like to read it, and perhaps we can take it from there, the conversation. You said, or you wrote, to fully understand the capacity of the pelvic bowl, we must also understand how this region of the body operates and what her needs are to function at her fullest capacity. So I would just like, to take the conversation towards what should, as women, we understand about how this region operates. And I'm also like drawing towards the clients that you see. What biggest myths or misunderstanding do you see? What we don't know about this region of our body?
First and foremost, that not having a relationship here is really common. I think so. One of the biggest myths spread by our cultures, our collective cultures, is that if you are not a hypersexualized woman in the world, or if you have dysfunction or pain or numbness here, somehow you're broken. Something is wrong with you. And the first thing I always share when I talk with women, whether it's a discovery call or, randomly on the street, because people tend to find me, is that being disconnected here is really common. That this part of our body for millennia has been called dangerous or dirty. In most conservative cultures, whether it's around sexuality, pelvic healing, empowerment, all of this is a place that we're told not to be embodied from, or that we have to, in our young age, sexuality wise, we're supposed to avoid this part of our body. We're not supposed to touch ourselves, not supposed to be curious, until it is at the right age or the right living situation of which that we can then share that with a partner, specifically, usually a man in many conservative cultures. So our pelvis, our sexuality is dirty or dangerous until it's able to be given away to someone else. And then we're supposed to be deeply embodied, deeply sexual, connected to our orgasm, connected to, all of these processes. And most of us don't. If we haven't been encouraged to have curiosity, it's really, really, really common to feel disconnect, to feel broken, and that no one is broken and everything can heal, I think is the foundation of the way that I work with somatic pelvic healing, because so much of this part of our body is connected to our nervous system. The pelvic diaphragm, or the pelvic floor, is part of our fight or flight reflex. So every time we have a stress response, it engages with us. And what that can lead to, if we're not able to navigate how our nervous system regulates, how our nervous system finds safety, is that it can lead to lots of dysfunction, whether it's urinary incontinence, peeing yourself, whether it's pain during intercourse, whether it's spiritual disconnect. Women who come to me, I say there's three kind of main threads of women when they really show up of like, I can no longer not do this work in some way. The first one is physiologically, some sort of really physical pain point. Again, incontinence, pain with intercourse, really uncomfortable menstruation cycles and things like that. The second one is more the emotional somatic trauma. I really believe to be in a female body in our world is to be mildly traumatized because of the culture and the context of which women are seen in our world. And so dealing with usually sexual trauma, sometimes emotional trauma, postpartum trauma, big T or little t trauma, as we sometimes say in that world, is another big thread that brings women my way. And the third one is spiritual, really trying to connect to the divine feminine energy, connecting to the parts of us that feel like they're not allowed to be online, the parts of us that are soft, the parts of us that want to receive. And often most women come with a mix of all of these different threads, but there's one that really is the thing. It's like something has to change. And that's when they show up at my door. And so there's so many different ways to journey into the pelvis to start to build a relationship here. And it really depends on each person.
Oh, that's so beautiful, the relationship with pelvis. And I'm just was imagining women coming to you. I bet it's still in our society, it's a bit of a taboo, or a bit of on that side of embarrassment, especially when there is such a disconnect with pelvis, with your own pelvis. And as you say, due to shame and due to patriarchy and so on and so forth. So I guess it's not easy, at least for all the women who come to you, it's not easy to make that first step and to ask for help.
No, I say the hardest part is usually signing up for a discovery call. I have many women who sign up once, cancel, sign up again, cancel, reschedule 5 or 6 times. It's a huge part of the journey. I'm usually not someone's first step. I would say that they've tried a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and they're feeling confident in their capacity to heal, or they're sometimes feeling desperate enough that the fear of trying is less than the fear of not trying. But I definitely get all the time that I've followed you on the internet for years, and I'm finally just getting the courage to call and reach out. And that's really normal. This work is scary. it is shadow work, not only shadow of the self, but it's the shadow and underbelly of our global culture, the
Right.
global way we relate to women and sexuality. And that is terrifying. It's really easy to just play along. When you're ready for a change, it's a big change in not only our bodies and what can happen for our life, but it's really rocking the boat. To show up and embrace your own pelvis is an act of rebellion against patriarchy.
That's true. It's a really being a rebellion, like a warrior against, the systems that are not working, that are collapsing, and yet, kind of going up there, claiming yourself, claiming your space, and claiming your body as a safe space for yourself to be right. Because for women, for generations up till now, it's not safe to be in their bodies. It's not safe to be outside in their bodies, right? So, as you say, they're layer upon layer upon layer. It's a deep, deep dive. So I can imagine that women, are kind of have this hesitation to come because of the blame, shame, embarrassment. And, even when we talk about the region of our pelvis, in my country, in Lithuania, and I bet it globally, there are so many names for it down there, or, the name that doesn't have a name, and so on and so forth. Already in our linguistics, in our language, it shows how much shadow, how much it's pushed towards that. So let's not talk about it. Let's not touch it. It is dirty, as you mentioned at the beginning in conversation. There is something embarrassing and something really, really bad about it. And so no wonder, I guess, we see so much dysfunction around sexuality, around, this mature being in our own bodies and claiming our own bodies.
Yeah, and
And
especially, oh, sorry, go for it.
I wanted just to step back when you were mentioning about the problems or challenges that women come to you, as in incontinence and with the bladder. I'm wondering, how about like yeast infections, bacterial infections, and all those basically very often things that you can see in women. Are those
Yeah,
also part of it?
yeah. I see clients all the time for chronic BV, bacterial vaginosis, yeast infections, um, fibroids, ovarian cysts, anything and everything that has to do with the pelvis has come at some point into my office, and the ones that haven't yet will definitely be coming in at some point, I'm sure. Um, and there's so many different ways to work with the body, and that's kind of what I share with many of my clients, depending on the type of work they want to do. There are many layers, and the right next step for some women is, or for all women, is the one that feels, um, if not safe, that feels inviting. So hands-on, hands-in touch work is not for every person. For many, it's not the right first step. For others, it's like the next best step for really having someone work with them. Working with a practitioner is not always the way for someone to really feel empowered on this journey. If you are going into a stress response, or a fight or flight or a trauma response because of the work, because you're pushing your boundaries of your nervous system and of your safety, that is not the right next step for you. And so really finding what is that tool that really inspires curiosity so that you want to engage with it. There are so many different ways to engage with this part of the body. And as we grow in our confidence with having a relationship to our pelvis and our pelvic bowl and these tissues and the energetics here, we really get to go deeper. So I have women who come to see me and we do energy work. And that is really the only step that they can move into and feeling safe and comfortable. Sometimes it's, massage body touch work, and we don't touch the pelvis at all, but really a technique that I really love is called cranial sacral therapy. So working with the cranial sacral system, so our nervous system and how it's nourished through physical fascial touch. And that's the way we tap into pelvic healing, because the bottom of our spine, your pelvis, has part of that cranial system. The sacrum is here, the tailbone is here. It's the end of the chain of the cranial sacral system. And so sometimes that's the touch work we do. Sometimes it's like DIY courses. Right now, the one that I have online currently available is a pelvic healing and using the yoni egg, which is a wonderful and terrible fad that's going around, depending on how and who they're teaching it, and how safe they're making the practice. The way that I offer in my kind of DIY online course is there's like 3 modules. We talk about pelvic healing and anatomy and physiology to give you a roadmap to what's actually happening and seeing if this is the right tool for you. It is an amazing tool for many women, and it's not the right tool for many others. And then we learn about the technique, and then there's lots of practices. And so for some women, doing this by themselves and really getting to explore in those bite-sized pieces creates safety, because any of those shameful questions they get to work with on themselves and get the answers answered via online content. And then they have the opportunity to do one-to-one kind of integration calls with me if that's something that they're looking for. Pelvic steaming is another tool in the offerings I offer women, especially with um, uh, working with the nervous system, but then also working with physiological imbalances in the pelvis is a big part of what steaming can be really powerful for. It's ancient traditional medicine that's been used all over the world. It's not just located to one culture, but if you look at cultures all over the globe, I think every continent except Antarctica has a history of some sort of pelvic hydrotherapy. So whether that's steam or smoke, every culture has some form of this for feminine healing or female bodied healing. And so we really unwind what is the tools for you, what is the moment for you, and how can we use that to work with the symptoms that are coming up for you, whether they're physical, emotional, or spiritual.
And I appreciate that so much, because when you were even mentioning that it's more as an invitation and it's so individual, that there is no a push in this therapy, that if you arrived, we have to do hands-on, hands-in. So it gives so much space, like really to find, as you mentioned, this safety and your own edges. So it's really like a therapy where I imagine you are invited into, versus that is prescribed something, like like sometimes there are situations when a specialist kind of knows better what you need in a sense. And
Yeah.
as women, as we talked about the shame and everything, sometimes for the sake of pleasing and not rocking the boat, as you also mentioned, we go along with it. So there was so much space in when you described all those beautiful therapies, and with the invitation just to really see what's best suits. And I think this is also a part of big healing, when a woman has a choice in her own healing journey, just with the support, of a specialist. And Sydney, could we go to that beautiful model of yours that you had of the pelvis? And if you could
Yeah.
just guide us through it, because I think this education is just spectacular.
Yeah, one of the big things that I offer in group context as well as online is embodied holistic sexual health. And so much of that, I think, especially now in the age of social media teachers and like 90-second fun facts, is understanding that many, many, I'd say more women than not, more humans than not, do not know the anatomy of their own body. And, especially when we're in the womanly arts, talking about female healing, sexuality healing, we are really, it's a lot of like the oh my goddess energy, right? Let's connect to our intuition. Let's run naked through a field. But how do we actually like ground that information? I talk in some of my courses about the difference between really the knowing intuition and the feeling intuition. And my work is really based on the feeling intuition of really being in the body, being in presence. And from that place, you get to cultivate more of that knowing, your psychic abilities, more of the other pieces. But for me, it's really important to have the actual physical roadmap. When I'm talking to women, whether it's about doing a self-de-armoring practice or using a tool like a yoni egg, like what's actually happening inside the womb space. We often imagine a pink light or, all of these like a beautiful sanctuary, but like what is happening? Where is it? What's located? Many people, men and women included, don't know that we have multiple holes in this area, that the place that if we're having penetrative sex, so the vaginal canal is not where we pee from. And there's no shame in that. Most humans in this world are not given any sort of sexual education. And if they are, it's often just about male-bodied anatomy, as well, male-bodied pleasure, and abstinence. So don't have sex, you'll get pregnant or an STD, or an STI. And so how do we start to just even orient to our space, orient to be able to have that curiosity? And so, basic female-bodied anatomy, we have our pelvic bones, taking out the organs for a moment. Pelvic bones here, so important in stability and finding safety. The inside here is why I refer to it as the pelvic bowl. It really is a pole that holds our pelvic organs, and then the organs of the abdomen on top of that. The outside of the female anatomy is called the vulva. Many of us, it's spread all throughout all Western cultures, call this area the vagina. The vagina is actually just the tube that goes from the outside to the bottom of the uterus, the cervix. But the outside of our female genitalia system network is the vulva. And then from there, we have the clitoris, which is this little yellow dot here. The clitoral anatomy really branches into the whole pelvic cavity. It is the main neural network for female pleasure, both internal and external. Below it, in this little hole here, is our urethra. It is where our urine comes out. It's where we pee from. It's located underneath the clitoris and above the vaginal opening. So the vaginal opening is here in between the lips. In my model, I just have the inner lip showing. And then we have the outer lips, the outer labia. And then we move back towards the perineum and the anus, the opening to the rectum. That is your vulva anatomy, is this anterior part. So from the perineum up. It is a really important part of our body to explore and to know, to have and receive touch from ourselves as well as from others. And our culture is really missing therapeutic non-sexual touch. It is, I do believe if we had more opportunities for therapeutic non-sexual touch in the world, we'd be in a much healthier world because of moving away from that longing or starvation for touch and connection. If you see other animals, other community-based animals in the world, there's so much touch that happens outside of the sexual context. And it's really important for the health of our nervous system. Our nervous system is our skin. It is like, the largest part of our nervous system is our skin. And our skin goes so long in famine, especially in our culture, where everything touch-oriented has to be sexualized.
Oh, just taking it in. Thank you so much. It's we're so true that we are so touch deprived, and definitely non-sexual touch deprived, because as you say, I bet that majority of us, if we go to what's our genitalia, if we go to our lower pelvis, that's with some goal or agenda attached to it, right? And I can imagine that for women or for men, we're not talking about women, to touch themselves, to give themselves non-sexual touch, just, placing your palms or placing your arms there, or doing some self-massage, inside or outside. It just blows my mind how deeply that runs through us, that it feels that we literally disconnect from that part of the body. We love the massage on our back, we love the massage, we love the head massage or the feet massage, and we go to the therapist. But when we think about massaging ourselves and touching ourselves, belly button and below, it's just like a complete red no zone. And it really, really blows my mind how much still education like this and just spreading the word. I think it's a big medicine. It's a big medicine today.
Yeah, I think it's really important too, in that the non-agendaed piece of it, of non-agendaed touch here. And so many of female health dysfunctions come from the physiological lack of touch here. So touch and movement in the pelvis is really important for blood flow, circulation, as well as lymphatic flow, are our two kind of fluid realms that we work with in this part of the body. And without touch here, without movement, is a lot of stagnation. Stagnation creates inflammation and imbalance. And it's really that foundational piece of why we have pain here, whether it's hormonal pain, our hormones are, our endocrine system travels through the bloodstream, as well as our lymphatic system creates congestion, creates pressure, and all of that over a long period of time of stagnation cause major pain points for the body. All menstruating people who deal with menstruation pain, so much of this is because of pelvic congestion, and that our systems can't function at their optimal health because of that stagnation. And so a lot of the work I do with women, whether it's steaming, self-touch techniques, or one-to-one touch practices with a practitioner like myself, is about how do we move that stagnation so that you can actually feel more, bring our nerves back online. And from that place of feeling more, so much can shift, whether it's around our story to sexuality. What does pleasure look like in my body? If you can't feel anything, you can't feel pleasure. And so from that place of really getting to create your own story to sexuality, or addressing more physical points, if we have more movement here, more flow, more release, all of a sudden that congestion, that pain, that pressure can move and swift, and our body has its natural capacity to regulate, its natural capacity to heal, can actually get the messages of, oh, this is what's going on right now. I know how to fix that. Whether it's a hormonal imbalance, and actually getting to read the right messages that the brain and the pelvic organs speak to each other, and noticing what's happening there, it's able to, in more optimal health, function.
What would you say for the women who really feel disconnected, feels possibly numb, and possibly have some pain during intercourse, and really feels like, sometimes women say, I just don't feel my pelvis. I don't feel anything below my belly button, as if there is like empty space. So how would you say, what would be the simplest things to start creating this relationship that you were talking so much during the conversation? Or how much to start touching yourself when it feels so foreign and so embarrassing and so wrong? I think there could be also a lot of guilt, like I am doing something wrong by touching my own body. When you think about it, it's just, yeah, what, and also about the movement you say, just to move this lymphatic and this stagnation. What would you say?
Yeah, well, the first thing I'd say is it's really common to feel numbness. Numbness in kind of like the scale of de-armoring, whether it's body or emotional armor that we hold to protect ourselves. Numbness is the far most extreme in contraction. So numbness is because the body does not feel safe. It's told us this and we've ignored it for long enough. And so it knows that something's wrong. Shut that shit down so we don't continue to feel pain and we can survive. So numbness is really, really normal in that sense of, if there's a lot of disconnect, if you had some trauma, to feel nothing here is a beautiful place to start. With that kind of deep body armor scale, numbness often moves into high sensation, whether that is an emotional, a feeling, a high sensation emotion like anger, or on the physical of usually feeling some sort of pain. As we melt the numbness, we get to the place of the pain point that was too painful to feel. So we went into numbness, and we have to move through that. This is not like a pass go, collect $200 kind of thing. It is really, we have to move through numbness into high sensation, usually high contractive sensation, before we can get into the softening of that, and then into really expansive sensation and presence. It is not, that's why it's considered shadow work. It's not always the easiest place to go, to think of, I can take this pill. If I do this one thing, all of a sudden I'll have full sensation and full connection. There's often an unwinding here that has to happen first. So just that kind of understanding that if it feels hard, that is often a part of the process. It doesn't have to be that way. But for most people, there'll be a sense of hardness or difficulty in that process because of what we've been holding on to, what we've been gripping. From there, really, there's no wrong way to start. Whether you want to work on the emotional piece of the shame, And titration is a really big way that we do work with de-armoring. So moving into that edge, similar to a yoga pose where it's like, oh, I've never done this before. It's a little bit more. We move towards our edge where we still feel connection. We still feel like we can be present, or to that point of presence that feels safe. So we're not going completely out of our safety zone, but we're playing with it. We go to our edge, whether that looks like just placing a hand on your low belly and taking 3 deep breaths. Noticing how the hand touches the belly and how the belly touches the hand in return. Sometimes it's more energetic, that my edge is just even trying to bring my awareness here, noticing the numbness and being okay that I feel nothing. For many people, that is the starting edge, is just being able to stay with the shame that there's numbness, as well as the shame of bringing presence there at the same time, that kind of dance between the two. And from the place of being in our edge, we come back to a resource, whether that's connecting to something greater than ourselves, whether it's connecting to a part of our body that loves to be touched. So moving the hand from the low belly, maybe to the chest or the breasts or the face, and really giving our body feedback that we didn't die, because that's what our nervous system is. When we move towards our edges of safety, the body goes into, are we going to die or not? And that's normal. And so coming back into, great, we moved to an edge, we moved to something that felt really intense. And now we move into something that feels really safe, to nourish, to resource, before then moving back into our edge and noticing if the line of that edge has shifted a little bit further away from what it was before. So getting to be a little bit more into presence, a little bit more into that curiosity we want to explore, but that doesn't quite feel safe yet. There's so many different practices for that. It's one of the reasons why I do, then in the holistic sexual health world, yoni eggs are either often a big fuck no or big fuck yes. I'm right in the middle of the reason why I believe yoni eggs are a powerful tool for some is because working with a crystal energy can feel really nourishing. It can be that resource of, yes, I'm not yet ready to touch my own body. I don't believe everyone has to be ready before they do their pelvic touch journey. Working with a crystal, it gets us curious. It gets us connected to the spiritual side of our witchy magic of, ooh, like there's something slightly taboo but playful about this. I get to give the healing power to the crystal so that I can feel safe in my body. And giving that power away for a moment intentionally can be really potent in the process of reclaiming it for yourself. It's why I think that that practice can work really well for some people, because the fear and the shame around touching your own body can be so paralyzing that it will never happen. But if we use a tool like a yoni egg, all of a sudden it's sitting on your altar space. It's like, oh, I'm really curious to try this. She inspires me to want to try this edge. And so the crystal itself becomes the resource for that titration process. And that's really why I offer it still to clients as a way of starting to build a relationship here, because it's that way of getting to have a friend without it being an actual practitioner. Getting to have that partner, that guide, that's something that you can give the responsibility to so that you can be with the presence of your edge. And that kind of titration in any element of working with something that feels really intense is really powerful in keeping the nervous system present for the growth, because it's not about being always in a regulated state. That's just not possible. And it doesn't mean we don't grow with that. We don't learn, we don't expand. It's about understanding the metaphor. One of my favorite teachers talks about it like a wave, being in the ocean, bobbing in the ocean. The waves will constantly keep coming. The waves don't stop in the ocean. Some waves we have the strength to just float over. They come, they're a little bit smaller. We have that capacity. Some come and they're about to break on us. And so we dive underneath them and go through them to avoid feeling the overwhelm. And others, no matter how much we want to try, crash in our face and we choke on seawater. The part of doing pelvic work or nervous system work is not about not having waves crash on us. Sometimes they're just going to happen that way. But the moment of you're choking on the seawater, we feel like we're about to die. Maybe we're turning in the in the current a little bit about remembering that we're not dying. I know how to swim, coming up for air, getting that air, coughing, realizing that like, fuck, I just swallowed seawater. And being able to reorient to, oh, the next wave I can bob over, the next one I'm going to go through, and finding our place back into regulation, which is being able to go over and under the waves versus not having dysregulation, but being able to find more capacity in the highs and the lows and our process of moving between regulation and dysregulation. I know I went on a tangent there, but that's kind of my short, long answer to really the power of pelvic medicine and how to start a relationship here is to unwind the story that it has to look a specific way, that you have to be perfect at it, and that if it feels hard, somehow you're doing it wrong. You're not. In doing anything and showing up for yourself, you're doing it right. And what is the right way for you is really the power of having reaching out to guides, is to help you find the right way for you. For me, it doesn't matter how you want to interact with this part of your body. My purpose is to inspire women to want to be curious about this part and to tell you there's hundreds of resources, hundreds of practitioners out there. Not enough, but there are plenty to be able to find the right access point for you.
There was so much permission in what you talk, and it led me to, because previously you were also speaking about the diaphragm of the pelvis, the one who in the fight or flight that kind of freezes or tenses a lot, and there is no enough blood. So when you were talking with this all permission and all the ways, the possibility to build up the relationship, and this permission to do it wrong, imperfect, because there is no one recipe how to do it, my pelvic diaphragm literally became soft. It's like it was like a breathing out, like Phew.
Yeah.
And you know what? I didn't even notice that actually my pelvis and my pelvic diaphragm was like a bit like I was on the I will stand up and go kind of
Yeah.
thing. And while you were talking and allowing and allowing and allowing, I just completely went on my sit bones, and it just like woof, landed on the chair. So you see, this education and this sharing, this is also a big part of the medicine, and I understand now why you also do online sessions. And is it only educational sessions, or do you work as well with a person during the session? How does it go?
Yeah, right now I'm offering a la carte options as I'm really building out more of a foundation with having my one-to-one clients, noticing what is like a really good recipe for most people. Before I did online work, I was, 95% body worker. So working with the body and doing in-person coaching and education through session work. And from that place really was able to develop a beautiful protocol and spaciousness for most women's bodies. We start off our work as a 3-month commitment container, involving 6 sessions, and really going into those layers, because it takes about a season to cultivate a relationship, to be able to work with this part of the body in our sessions. So our sessions are like 2 to 2.5 hours long. We do them every other week. And there's time for integration. Really, for me, the magic of this as a lifestyle shift comes in the integration piece. That idea that it's not just what happens in session, whether if you think of like a good therapy session, like, I had this really juicy insight, or a great Koya class, this really juicy insight. And yes, we talk about it with our girlfriends for the next 2 weeks, but it's then how does that insight move into a lifestyle of the way we relate to the world around us? And that's where the deep medicine comes from, and often why kind of this beautiful foundational container I created in the embodied work, in the in-person work. We take a season. It takes about a season to really notice that, and to like know and really fully believe and feel, I'm not the same woman I was 12 weeks ago. Similar to if you think at any point in your life, who were you 12 weeks ago? So much insight has come through that you might have the same problems, the same fights with your partner, maybe some of the same pain issues, but level of who you are, your cells are different. And so I developed that over the years of my pelvic in-person practice. And I'll fully admit that I'm in the process of figuring out what that perfect, or if not perfect, because perfection is death, but that really powerful virtual container is. And I have so many ideas, and I have wonderful clients who are willing to experiment with me of, I can tell from your story of like, this is what I think would work for you. And so right now I work a la carte with women in the online world. As I'm really developing, here are the foundational pillars of education that are needed. Here are the foundational types of touch. Here are the tools. We really come up with a self-care protocol for you, because the difference with virtual work than in-person work is you are fully accountable for how this happens in your body. We have our sessions together. It's a type of somatic coaching where we focus and orient as to pelvic medicine as that part. So it's a lot of noticing the body, visualizations, feeling in the body. So it's really deep somatic coaching, but then orienting towards letting that feeling come all the way down into the pelvis, noticing what we have here. Sometimes I guide clients on self-touch practices. Often for the tools we integrate, if they're like curious about doing the yoni egg course, or working with a yoni egg, we'll do kind of the coursework and integration together. I'm really your integration somatic coach, as well as then being able to process through the body and process through the pelvis. I've worked with women where, if we have their camera is off, and I guide them through a touch practice of really working with the vulva tissues, getting to be with that. Sometimes the camera's not off and they are, draped, and we really working with a wand to de-armor, and having that de-armor practice where I get to guide them. I get to see the way that their breath is changing, similar to an online breathwork class. It really depends on the person, and every session shifts depending on what our needs are. I offer koi-inspired movement often in some of our somatic coaching, of really working with a different theme. When I had kind of a mentorship program with women about this, it was a 4-cycle practice where we worked on intuition and understanding our feeling intuition versus our knowing intuition. We worked on pelvic anatomy. Like some of it is just, really getting to have these bits of pieces in sexual health anatomy to then be able to integrate. Like, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I notice so much shame when I start to think about my cervix because I have HPV, or, I've had cervical dysplasia. And that's the piece that I really have a hard time connecting to. And so we work on the different energetic physiological properties of the cervix together. Then we have, working with really pelvic health as a medicine, whether it's steaming, touch practices, usually a mix of it all in between. And then integration. Really, so much of the virtual realm is you are fully in control. There's a place where like I can't come and touch your body and read it in the same way I can if you're in the same space with me, and I can read your energetic field. It's about a lot of that self-starter energy, and it's a different type of person often who wants to do the virtual work than the person who wants to do the in-person work. And they're both powerful, and you can do all the same touch work that I do with your body as we do together in person with yourself. And it's about finding the confidence for that. And that's really what I'm here for, is to teach you the practices, to be with you in the moments of, I don't know if I'm doing this right, and help me continue to feel the inspiration in spite of the waves of shame that often come in trying to start a new practice. I don't know if that answered all the questions, but how does that
yeah,
land?
and it really sounds very delicious. This a la carte, thing that you can really pick and choose, and I truly believe that the containers are very different when in person and out. And I felt also the integration, possibly for me, I was like kind of moving it through me when I'm allowed to immediately experience on myself. The integration for me and processing, not always, but usually happens quicker, because when I'm with someone in person, I tend to outsource my kind of authority and power. Definitely, it depends on the dynamics, but more usually than not, I will, because it feels like by default easier. While when I'm, as I said, in online space and by myself and doing it myself, so kind of nobody else but me, it for me sometimes is like a shortcut, to kind of a relationship or result wherever I'm moving at. So it sounds super, super good. So if anyone is interested, is it already like going on this a la carte thingy, and it's where can people find it?
Yeah, so it's online. The way that my booking app works right now is in the pelvic healing section. You can choose an in-person session or a virtual session. So for in-person work, I do require a discovery call to really make sure it's the right fit for you. It's a much higher financial investment to do in-person work together, touch work. And for those who aren't local, I'm here in Denver, Colorado, in the United States right now. We do the virtual work, and they're usually anywhere between a 60 to 90-minute session. Really depends on what your needs are. I also, if you're looking like I know the technique I want to use, I want to do steaming, I do virtual steaming consults. So we talk about pelvic steaming. We do a really deep health intake to figure out what are the right herbs for you, what's the right protocol. And then working that way with women. I have an online course for, pelvic health and the yoni egg, if that's a direction women want to go into. And then kind of mid this year, I'll have really more of a full program that I am really excited to be creating, kind of a 9 cycles, whether it's a program kind of taking women through over the course of 6 months or more of like a year spread out. That is all kind of in the works of feeling like what my capacity wants to be for this, because there's so much information and we don't need much information to really start that relationship. I know for those who don't know, we met via Koya, an Akoya teacher training. And I think of the virtual elements of this work very similar to what it feels like to go to a Akoya class. You have a facilitator who's decided on a theme that is really important to work on, or something that is connected to the human experience, and has created the playlist. But it's all, and they give you cues to come into the body, cues to work through. There's a structure of the way that the movements we practice. But it's all about your relationship to that. So similar with clients, usually the theme they choose, it's like, what is your intention? What feels potent to move? And from that, I curate for you the different techniques and ways to move through your body. But it's all the information and all the medicine is you having a relationship with it. So whether it's, I'm coming from a place where touching below my belly button feels really dangerous. So we might move into a movement practice, doing, putting on a little bit of music and dancing into the hips, noticing if we can just bring physical movement here without touch. Maybe we bring visualization here, really starting to work with understanding the anatomy, the paces of the body, and then energetically trying to follow that roadmap. Similar to how I just shared those different places on the vulva, we visualize, what does it feel like? Can I bring sensation? Can I squeeze the muscles? Can I feel the softening? And then noticing what comes up for you. So it's, my question is not me tell you this is what you should be doing, this is what you should be feeling. My questions are often, I'm curious what's coming up for you. What are you noticing? If I see my client having an emotional release, we breathe through it together. We let it really settle. We let it be a part of there. And when it feels ready to be shared, we share it. Or actually, this is just a movement I want to keep for myself. But what I'm noticing in my body and allowing that boundary of I'm not sharing the story is I feel safe. I feel safer because I don't have to share, oh, I'm having this memory about a trauma. All of those pieces, you get to have someone hold the container, hold that hypervigilance for you. So your nervous system gets to just be in the memory, in the moment, in the sensation to move through it. And that's really what somatic coaching looks like and why it can be so powerful, especially for women who do feel like we give our power away to a practitioner. I use the same techniques in person. I'm not telling you what's going on. And occasionally, if the client is open to it and they ask for it, I'll share what I'm feeling, similar to a virtual session. If you've ever done, really deep somatic coaching, at least coaching or therapy, my therapist will often say, as moving through something is like, as you were sharing, as you're moving through, I felt this movement in my body. I'm curious, for me, that represents that. I'm curious how that resonates with you versus I saw you clench your body. So I'm thinking that, you're in pain. Really putting the words of what's there for you versus allowing the knowing that you know everything. And sometimes having a practitioner helps the reorientation to that knowing, to that remembering.
Bringing a person all the time back to herself or himself, just within. So beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, Sydney, I could talk because I have a list here, that it was some things that we didn't touch upon. Like, I will just mention some of them for people to go and really look in your Instagram. I will put everything, the links below our videos. So it's also infertility, anxiety, period problems, the posture, right? Tightness, how we keep ourselves, the jaw tension and everything. There is so much richness there. And before we wrap up, I have just a couple of questions. I just want to say, because we're in Dubai, and in Dubai now all month we have fireworks. So in some 3 minutes, they I think they could start fireworks. So if you hear some kind of sound, which might sound differently through the headphones, so just know that we're in the middle of the fireworks happening.
Of course.
So just, a couple of more questions. When you say that women changes when they work with you, right? Whatever it's needed for them, and they have this approach, you say sometimes the pain doesn't disappear immediately because it might have been there for 40, 50, 60 years with them, and it's really a process. It's a long process. Patient titration, as you said, is very important. But what do you see? Like what comes for women when something is softened, when something is unfolding? But what do you notice changing for them?
Yeah. The reason why I call my entire practice a container for transformation is because that's really what happens when we practice with the body. And I think of pelvic medicine as slow medicine. So much about the way we're indoctrined into thinking about healing is I take this one pill, I do this one thing, I need to be fixed forever. And similar to the metaphor of the nervous system, slow medicine is nervous system medicine. And so what it means is it doesn't mean that contraction doesn't happen. It doesn't mean that if you're really, really stressed out, you might deal with symptoms of bladder incontinence. That might be your body's way of telling you, I am in overwhelm right now. And so I'm giving that overwhelm to this organ's energy. And that's why you feel these things. It's information, looking at our pain points as information versus problems that we pathologize. I have women who come to see me, and in one session, huge things open. Most people have dramatic shifts in just a few sessions. And the sustainability of that is to move at the pace of the nervous system, which is slow medicine, which is why I always speak to that piece of often in slow medicine, we move out of numbness into contraction before expansion. Doesn't mean that can't all happen in one session. It doesn't mean that, we have a big emotional release, which is a type of contraction, right? Bringing in the tears, feeling, oh my God, I'm feeling the pain. I'm feeling the deep shame in my body. And in acknowledging it, it gets to dissipate. We reorient the nervous system. We unwind the story from our physical tissues. And so many of my clients come, besides being different people at the end of our time together, at the end of the first kind of chapter of our time together, because many women work with me more so than just those 3 months. The one thing people always ask, what can you guarantee? And I say there are no guarantees because everybody is different and every way of interpreting this medicine will be different. But the one thing that I see consistently, no matter which way we work, is that anchoredness to self, the idea of connecting more deeply to your fuck yes and your hell no, to be able to make the right choices for you and your body. It doesn't mean that we don't get dysregulated, end up in our attachment style kind of dysregulation, anxious or avoidant. It means that we get to feel more presence. We get to feel more capacity in navigating the highs and the lows and everything between that expansion and contraction of the human existence. And so whether that looks like more pleasure and more sensation during sex with a partner or with self, less shame, being able to say no and having better boundaries, feeling more connected to your creativity. One of my dear clients, came to see me wanting to work on feeling more deeply connected to her feminine energy. It was much more of a spiritual initiation point of why she came. And in the process, we noticed how actually contracted she felt around her creative power. She's a singer. After our time together, she wrote a whole album, has been touring the album for a long period of time now, almost a year now. Came from being able to feel more connected to this part of her body, to tap into her creative power. I have clients who write poems. I have clients who are able to have difficult conversations with loved ones. I have clients who do really courageous things that they never thought were possible, to start businesses. It's the reason why sexuality, health, and like female entrepreneurship are like married together, is when we feel safe here, we feel more capable to share our magic. The jaw, the voice are deeply connected to the pelvis physiologically as well as energetically. So sharing our truth, showing up, being big, taking up space, all of these themes come and unwind when doing pelvic healing, when doing full body healing, but especially when focused on allowing the pelvis to be a part of that journey. We allow for more capacity, like our capacity as humans, our capacity. The other little thing I think you talked about is fertility, like is so deeply connected here. So many of our female hormones live here in stagnation. And when we move that, they get to move through our whole body. We create holistic, full body health. The pelvis is just one piece of it. I focus on that because I believe it's the piece that our culture so often ignores. And so it needs that extra voice to bring more diversity into full body healing. It's not just about opening your heart if you're coming to this work for curiosity around love, connection. The heart space is something that we've talked so much about. It's most people's original point of contact. But how do we acknowledge the heart chakra and the pelvic chakra, the sacral chakra, are mirrors to each other? How do we bring it into the embodiment instead of just into the spiritual? And really that is like the medicine of full body healing through pelvic health.
It's so much there, and the also the last ones that you touched upon, the bypassing and spiritual bypassing, because and I think that sometimes when we are disconnected from, we cannot, as you say, anchor. You said one of the big things that happen, like women really, for me, this anchor, as you described, is like coming back home and being at home in my, in my skin, in my body, and allowing myself to feel, yeah, kind of a sense of I am home. I am home is such a very, very precious, but very, very bone-like feeling. So it's not only etheric and somewhere there. And very shortly, did you find that the symptoms that women come to you are, majority of them are purely physiological, by which I mean structurally something is not okay with the body, or you found it more connected with emotions, with those feelings and beliefs of guilt, shame, embarrassment, and some histories of trauma, obviously? Which are the bigger piece there?
It's a both and. It is equal, I think. Often the root cause of something can be emotional. Sometimes it's physical, especially if it's connected to the birth world, like birthing a human does cause a physical trauma in the body in our Western world of birthing. And the body is capable of healing that if we give it time to rest. It often is not given that time. But, that can be, it could be, I had an injury, all these things. I like fell on my tailbone. That could be the root cause of it. But it's like, it is completely married together, the emotional somatic piece. So the emotional and the body piece. And that's really the way that I work differently than a pelvic floor PT in my body work, is this idea. And that's the basis of Tammy Lynn Kent's work, who created holistic pelvic care, is that we can't separate the story or the emotional energetic piece from the physicality, from what's showing up in the pain point. If anyone's ever had their heart broken, you physically feel that in your body. There's a physical contraction. Our nerves physically contract our tissues, especially our fascial tissue, our connective tissue, go hand in hand. And for me, the fascia is that space between the physical and the emotional. It moves from its fluid state to its rigid state, depending on emotionally, are we safe or are we not? And neurologically, what is happening? And it is a physical tissue that will contract. or soften and expand, create that unwind, that softening, that melting in the body. And so we work with the both and of that. You know, the example I use the most because it makes a lot of sense to women is bladder incontinence. So feeling some sort of lack of control over like leakage with urine. And let's say it started as a physiological thing. You're postpartum. It's, you know, you're maybe 4 months postpartum. And when you sneeze, you pee a little bit because something happened with your pelvic floor in the birth process and it didn't get to heal completely correctly. Similar to like if you don't set a bone correct, sometimes it might not align correctly. We can go in with just physiological techniques and work the tissue to adjust the bladder to be sitting more optimally in the pelvic cavity, which will help with that. So that your pelvic diaphragm muscles or pelvic floor muscles can contract, create stability for when you sneeze. Amazing. That will not last in the body. That will not hold. If the brain keeps thinking that something is in danger, it's going to go into how do we brace, and which will often shift the bladder out of alignment. If you've been peeing yourself every time you sneeze, you start to have a fear response, a trauma response that I don't know if I can go to the grocery store. I don't know if I can leave the house. Do I have a spare pair of underwear with me? What color am I wearing? Like all of those, the trauma of I feel out of control, which is kind of the mantra of the bladder is all about control. I feel out of control very deeply. That pelvic tissue, that bladder tissue, that neural connection between bladder, pee sensation, desire to go urinate, and the brain becomes a trauma response of, oh shit, I feel out of control. Therefore, I have a chronic pain pattern here. And so we work with the emotional somatic piece of control, of the shame around maybe that story where you did pee yourself waiting in line at the grocery store, or where you had to like cancel a meeting last minute, pick your child up late from school because you had to go change. We work with that story to have the body remember we are no longer in that danger. We are safe. So that when we do then the manual work to readjust our body and our orientation physically, the emotional, somatic, and the nervous system, those connections really align. And often we don't even have to do the physical touch piece or very light physical touch. It's not like deep tissue maneuvering work that we do. The tissues will reorient to safety. It completes its cycle of stress into that bracing because it thinks it's still in danger to, oh, I'm safe. I can soften, and then the body takes the rest away. And the body's like, oh, this is where the bladder is supposed to be. I orient these tissues from proprioception. I know the positioning feels right here. And all of a sudden, that chronic incontinence shifts. And so it's very much a married piece of the both and. I don't think you can do one without the other. We're only adjusting half of the self if we do it that way. And so much of that is connected to our human existence, is that we are cognitive, emotional beings. Emotions are here as part of our system of survival, as part of our system of connection. They are super healthy and expansive, and they're not everything. Our physicality is a big part of us. And so how do we allow both these elements of our humanity, our physicality and our emotionality, to be a part of our healing journey? Because when we only respect one of them, we really take away from our full potential of being.
Here we go. Boom. Coming back to the holistic approach, that everything matters and that the body has self-healing mechanism. Just when we really allow and participate together with it holistically, taking into account everything, this awesome, fascinating being physical that we are, emotional, mental. Thank you, Sydney, so much. Thank you. Thank you for your time. I guess it's early in your part of the world. Is it morning?
It is morning. Yeah.
So thank you for your time. And just to wrap our conversation, is there anything that I haven't asked you or you think it's important to mention for women to know? Any thought you would like to leave the listeners with?
There's so much things that we haven't touched upon. And the one thing I always love to leave for anyone who's made it this far through this conversation and is really curious is the reminder that you're not broken, that no matter how hard it feels to be navigating your human experience, I truly believe that everything can heal, and that there are ways to navigate differently, to feel more empowered by your human experience. Because I think the feedback we get most in the world is that we're broken, especially if you live inside a female body, and you're not broken and you're not alone in this journey. There are so many different ways, whether this work resonates with you or working at it a different direction, a different way. There's so many ways to heal. And I truly believe that everything can heal.
Thank you so much for this. And I will put below the links to your accounts, and so people can go and check your beautiful educational information that you share, many of it, which I found to be very, very helpful for myself. And if anyone is interested to have a call and sessions with you, so everything will be there. So thank you, Sydney, so much. And hope just to have more conversations with you, because it's just a well, infinite well. Wherever you go, it's like so many questions still to talk over.
Thank you for having me. It's so lovely to see you and to get to spend this morning together.
Thank you.